a fantastic day of presentations, and we'll be starting momentarily. The keynote on the main stage is just finishing up, so we're giving them one more second. And as we get ready to go, I'd like to introduce our first presenter today on the People stage back in North America. We will be hearing from the incredible, unparalleled Debbie Holton, president of Metrix, an ASME company. And we're talking about something wildly important and probably relevant to you. Debbie, I'd like to invite you to the stage now to discuss flipping the script from burnout to balance. Debbie, whenever you turn on your camera, you're here.
Okay, so here I am, unparalleled, unequaled. Wow. Thanks, Sarah. Appreciate that very much. For those of you who are pulling the all-nighter from the Asia Pacific event too, hello and welcome. I'm actually in Mexico City today, so I get to be from another place in the world as well. So very glad to be here with all of you, talking about, a topic of great importance and something that we're all really, I think all of us are really dealing with, which is burnout. And, I've spent the last 20 plus years, working directly with manufacturing people and building communities in additive manufacturing and digital transformation and robotics and other areas. And so I just really appreciate the importance of this community here for women in 3D printing. I think a lot of you will agree that never before have we lived in a time when the barriers between our work life and our personal life have been just so porous. It seems like, there's just everything is kind of crazy and we're super busy. I am sharing my screen now, so hopefully you all can see that. And you can, so that's great. I'm going to leave it in this mode because it just keeps weird things from happening. So hopefully you guys can see these slides. But I just really wanted to spend this time sharing with you some of the things that I've learned about burnout, about what it means, about, kind of how to fight it and how to deal with it and how to be resilient in your career. There's just a lot of things that we're faced with as women. And, the pandemic that we've been going through didn't necessarily create change in itself. It just accelerated it. And so technology and a lot of the things that we're doing are working, are leading our families. Yes, we all should have bought stock in Zoom. Absolutely, no doubt. But unfortunately, we can't predict the future. And so when the world changes, business changes, how people learn, how they connect, it's all changing. And so this increasing rate of change is affecting everything in the entire value chain. Our transportation, our energy, consumer products. I heard there's a cream cheese shortage somewhere, which, should strike fear in bagel people everywhere. But really, what does it mean for our working life? And for a lot of us, we started the pandemic and nobody really knew what to expect. And we really kind of had this organizational bootstraps adrenaline where we were like, okay, we're going to get together. We're going to get this stuff done. And people did amazing things. This conference was stood up in the pandemic, as a matter of fact. In our organization, we stood up many different virtual events and activities and things. And I know a lot of you did some amazing things as well. But, it's really no surprise that after the 20-something month of barking dogs and kids sitting at the table with you while you're working, days and days on screens, your kids are in virtual school, maybe they're at home, maybe they're back at school. So we've all just kind of had it and we're kind of losing our minds at this point. So there's a funny story, we went straight to Zoom during the pandemic, which I'm sure a lot of you did. And we had someone at our organization who lived in a small kind of New York apartment with a large family. And so we always looked at their Zoom background and we said, where are you? Till one day we finally asked and we said, where are you? Well, this person was in a closet. Was really the only quiet place for them to take calls. So it's no surprise that we've really kind of gotten to the point where we've lost it. So, what is burnout? I think this is important to think about because a lot of us have, different ideas about what burnout is or kind of how we feel about it. And, I would say that burnout does have a specific definition. If you are at the point where you can't get out of bed in the morning, or you are not enjoying anything in your life anymore, you should really seek some mental health advice from a professional. This is really about work-related burnout, life-related burnout. But if you really have, issues in that area and things that you're feeling about, mental health is physical health, and please pursue those solutions for yourself. I was on a ski lift over the holidays with some nurses, and they were talking about life in general. And they said, we've been worried about what happens post-COVID. And they said, but, I think we don't have to worry about that anymore, because there is no post-COVID. And I think for a lot of us, we're kind of in this endemic, depending on who you listen to. I think Spain has declared it an endemic. But this new not normal that's come upon us and our colleagues, and especially women, it's real. And according to the Mayo Clinic, which, we love the Mayo Clinic, we love Amy Alexander and Dr. J. And what they say is there's an official definition, which is that a state of physical or emotional exhaustion that also involves a sense of reduced accomplishment and a loss of personal identity. The original work on burnout dates back to the 1970s by a fellow, Herbert Freudenberger, who sounds surprisingly like a character from Futurama, for those of you who watch that. But basically what it means is you're overwhelmed and exhausted by everything you have to do, which is kind of typical for women. But this is the difference, which is that you're still worried that you're not doing enough. So in other words, it's an emotional, mental, physical, and spiritual debilitation that's caused by chronic stress and excessive sacrifices, which is, I have a friend of mine who calls them trade-offs, but sometimes they're a whole lot more than that. And there's three pieces of it. There's depersonalization, which really means you've separated yourself emotionally from your work versus investing in it and getting excited about it. You have a decreased sense of accomplishment, which is working harder and harder, but feeling like you're making less of an impact. And emotional exhaustion, which is ongoing demands and unmeetable expectations. And interestingly enough, men affiliate more with the depersonalization side of burnout, whereas women really appreciate emotional exhaustion. That's really where we kind of park our horse. And it is natural to feel this way. We shouldn't feel bad about feeling this way, but it's not normal. And we really shouldn't resign ourselves to feeling like our lives have to be this way, because they do not. A couple interesting statistics here. Leanin.org and McKinsey did a study on women in the workplace. They do it every year, and they have some new findings that came out this last September. And it's really no surprise that after day after day after day, that all this Wonder Woman energy, I always love that picture of Wonder Woman with her bracelets, where she's able to kind of deflect all the things that come her way. But a lot of that energy has kind of been replaced by fatigue and burnout. And in this study, there's some really alarming things, which is, may not be a surprise to any of you, but women are affected by burnout at a much higher rate than men. And we are more burned out than we were just a year ago, according to this study, and it is escalating much faster. So consider this, which is that 1 in 3 women have considered downshifting their career or leaving the workforce entirely, compared with 1 in 4 who said this just a few months into the pandemic. And then 4 in 10 women have considered leaving their jobs or switching jobs. And I'll bet most of you in this session know someone who has talked about this, vented to you over a extremely large glass of wine, or someone who has literally called it quits. And here's the thing about the Great Resignation that everyone, is talking about. It's all over the news now. That means that those who stay have more to do because others have left. So that should be very exciting for everyone to think about. And then the idea that this third shift is real. Even now in 2022, women average 5+ hours a day of housework and caregiving, in addition to the 8 hours or more spent at work. You start to do the math, and it's no wonder that, people aren't sleeping at night. But it's about being the manager of the household, remembering, it's something as simple as remembering whose birthday it is, keeping an eye on when the cat's food is running low, not only just the double burden of work and domestic labor, but also the emotional work that women engage in, both at work and at home. One of the things that I think is interesting is when people say, just relax, right? Just relax. You need some me time. You need, honestly, if a nice mani-pedi and a massage could cure burnout, we'd be great. We'd all be perfectly buffed and polished and right there. And I recently discovered a book by Emily Nagoski and Amelia Nagoski, who are both of them are Dr. Emily and Dr. Amelia. And they are identical twin sisters, which is interesting enough. But one of the main tenets of the book is separating stress from stressors. Stressors are those things that bother us, right? Whether it's, someone tailgating us on the freeway, or the fact that the laundry has now expanded beyond the confines of your laundry room. That is the stressor. But to separate the stress from the stressor allows us to deal with the stress itself. Stress is an emotional reaction, but it also has physical consequences. I mean, people end up in the hospital with stress. It does happen. And so burnout sets in when we don't complete that stress response cycle. My dad used to have a nice little saying, which was impression without expression leads to depression. So if you guys like that, you can take it with you. But the idea is that our bodies are designed to respond to stressors with a physical reaction. It has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And I'm really glad that Adam's getting pedicures. I'm watching the chat window here. So the beginning is the perceived threat, right? So in the middle is to do something with your body. And then the end is when the all clear signal happens and we know that that threat has passed and we can move on. This was useful in those early days of humanity when we were being chased by lions and tigers. We ran away or we fought the mountain lion. And then when we got back to the village and we celebrated with our friends, we knew that everything was fine and we could go on. But those same signals and reactions are present now when someone's tailgating us on the freeway, when we're working towards a massive deadline. Our body is still looking for an activity to really release that stress. And I know it seems like we're all stressed all the time, but this is a real physiological situation. And I love this quote from the book, which I'm just going to read to you, that the stress itself will kill you faster than the stressor will, because you have to complete the stress response cycle. There's a saying in this book, which is that feelings are tunnels. So don't get stuck in the middle. So you have to see that feeling all the way through to the end. There's several podcasts. There's a Brene Brown podcast. There's a TED Talk. There's a lot of different features on this particular book and this line of thinking. If this speaks to you somehow, I would encourage you to pursue this and learn more about this particular technique, because it's really not about just taking care of ourselves in self-care, even though that is not bad advice. But there really are some physiological things that are important to note here too. So let's just say you're burned out and you want to tell your boss that you're burned out. Unfortunately, most of us, or fortunately, most of us do not work for Dr. Phil. So our leaders are not therapists. So think about what you really need to do to address your work-related stress and burnout. Is it a leave of absence? Is it coaching or training? Do you need it within the realm of work, or do you need it within your life at large? A lot of companies have employee assistance programs. A pandemic puppy is very helpful to release stress. I like that too. I love my dog. He always lowers my blood pressure. But, there's EAP programs to provide childcare options, sometimes elder care resources. Dig in there and see maybe what your company also has possible. But do you feel like it's safe for you to share with your boss? Because sometimes we don't really, breaking the ice can be hard. I've had great bosses in my life, and I've had some that I probably wouldn't have necessarily shared my thoughts and feelings with. So the reality is, though, that if you can come with potential solutions in mind of the things that you think you might need to alleviate this burnout that you're going through, it then becomes a very clear business conversation. And it's like, you are the asset to this company. And to really maximize this asset, we need to make an investment here. And this is what it needs to be for. And so I think that those are conversations that can be had. But the great thing that happens when you break the ice here, you'll find that you're probably not the only person in your group that's really experiencing this kind of burnout. And this can provide deeper trust with your colleagues. It can allow other people to open up. And it really can be the beginning of culture change in your organization, where people feel like they can really level with what they're dealing with both at work and at home. The good news is for us as women is that women leaders show up. We show up in the way that companies say they want leaders to show up. Now, this particular woman leader in this slide, I really liked because she showed up with coffee, which makes me very happy. But, we depend upon the contributions of a diverse group of colleagues, and women bring so much to engineering and manufacturing and every profession. Great leaders make a difference. And we all have an important role to play in really fighting this burnout. We're in this world that's always on. A lot of us are remote. This flexible hours now is kind of like all hours, which is not good. But leadership can make a difference here, and leadership can make just about any situation work. Now, you may or may not be a leader of people, but we're all leaders of ourselves. And we can all kind of take that leadership position in our own lives. But for those of you who lead people in an organization, it's really our responsibility to concentrate and provide the tools, frameworks, and culture, and provide the flexibility to really support our teams. There's some great research from MIT School of Business, the Sloan School of Business, Dr. Aaron Kelly, who said that employees whose managers were trained to check in to see how they were doing, personally and professionally, and to give them the flexibility to work how they wanted, had significantly lower levels of burnout and psychological distress. I mean, we may be thinking, well, gee, no kidding, right? But now we can say it's backed up by research. It's not just what we think. And women are far more likely to invest in the success of coworkers and into their teams. And you see some really great statistics here. Both Fast Company had a study, and the McKinsey LeanIn.org study reinforced this, that despite our own increasing levels of burnout, that the research indicates that we as women take a lot more action to fight burnout, managing workloads, supporting diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts, taking extra time in our workday to do these things along with the work that we've been given. And it does make a difference. Women and our emotional intelligence has now really spilled over into the workplace. It makes us amazing leaders, and it really makes us the kind of leaders that companies need right now. So here's the good piece of it, right? So this is a competitive edge for a company, is building this positive morale. And as women, we excel at acknowledging people's emotional and physical needs. And, this really makes sense. But here's the thing. And we say this in manufacturing all the time. If you can't measure it, you can't make it. So companies say that this is extremely important. 9 out of 10 companies said this is critical. We must support employee well-being, right? But only 25% of those in the LeanIn.org study actually recognize it and reward it. So if things are not being measured, if things are not being recognized, they're not going to be happening in a company. They're just not going to be. For years, we called things soft skills. These are the essential, foundational, fundamental skills of leading an organization and working with people every day. And when we overlook this important work of well-being and DEI, it hurts women who are investing their time and energy in these priorities, and it hurts companies. And it really affects everyone because it's difficult to make progress on these things that aren't seen as important. So senior leadership really needs to challenge managers to do more to alleviate this stress and exhaustion and reward it when it's being done. Investing in DEI in a meaningful way. And all of us need to be contributing to this positive culture, because respect and recognition really speak volumes, and they have tangible impact. We need to be contributing to a culture where all employees feel comfortable in bringing their unique ideas, perspectives, and experiences to the table. It's where everyone really excels. People managers especially need to be supported in their work, and they need the tools and the frameworks to support their teams. Another idea that I came across is this idea of team interventions. And it's really not necessarily about substance abuse, although some of us may have watched those shows, or trying to keep your friend from marrying the wrong person. It's a different kind of team intervention where everyone can kind of sit down as a team, talk through the stress that people are experiencing, and try to envision where the team could go if they let go of things like meetings all the time, check-ins all the time. Everybody's got to be everywhere all the time. Some of these demands that we've put on ourselves in this Zoom culture that we kind of live in, and work together to really, kind of define these things as a team. Another really important piece to consider is setting boundaries. I don't know if any of you have watched Emily in Paris. It's some real trashy television, I'm just going to say, but it's interesting. And so it's this young professional woman who's spending a year in Paris for her company. And thanks, Dana, if you like Emily in Paris. But I found this out that way. You would think I did some research, but it's actually illegal in France to call employees on the weekend, just so you know. This is something that really has, I'm not saying we should create laws in this way, but it really has, made this aware that you need to really look at negotiating real policies that limit the spillover of work into employees' private lives. Like I was saying earlier, this boundaries between our personal life and our work life are really very fluid now. And unfortunately, a lot of the onus is being put on employees to set their own boundaries. And I would encourage you to do that for sure. But, we also need to see a shift where companies are really taking more of the ownership to figure out those boundaries, establishing company-wide norms. One of the things that I find myself doing is I'll sit at night and kind of clean out my inbox and do some different things. And I've tried to remember to use the delay send feature so that my team is not getting emails at 10 o'clock at night, just because that works for me and feeling like they need to respond to that. I know a lot of us, especially earlier in our careers and even now, when you're in a company, you're really looking for what are those unwritten rules. Like, I know that I don't have to respond to this email, but are you really wanting me to respond to this email? And so people respond to the emails. And I found my own team responding to emails at 10:30 at night. I'm like, oh my God, no, please, no, don't feel like you have to respond to this. But, as leaders, we need to model the behavior, set boundaries. Companies also need to provide resources and training to really help us all navigate this kind of remote and hybrid in-person world that we're in. There's just a lot of power there and things that we need to do to respect people's personal time. But, policies must be practiced, practice must be policy. And it's really down the road to creating a more flexible and inclusive work environment. And then, of course, my favorite part of this presentation is the idea that, one of the best ways to really fight burnout is to create a bubble of love around yourself. And this is from that book by the Nagoski sisters. And basically what they said is, surround yourself with people that care about your well-being as much as you care about theirs. And not all of us have a huge family at home or a lot of people around. Maybe we've just moved to a new city. But I think this is where our community here at Women in 3D Printing, serves a very important role in us supporting each other and supporting our industry at this time of really unprecedented change and disruption. Mentorship, sponsorship, which is different than mentorship, which is a whole nother presentation. But the idea of really taking an interest in someone and sponsoring them within an organization, enabling diversity, facilitating connections. We've all been extremely isolated over the last 2 years. From time to time, it kind of ebbs and flows, but some of us continue to work remotely, but there's really no reason you can't reach out, even within this community here on the event today, or engage with your local chapter of Women in 3D Printing. They're all over the world, honestly, because working together, we're really stronger and healthier. One of the incredible things about this industry and the Women in 3D Printing community, and you'll see some other groups noted there too, Women in Manufacturing, ASME has a group, Women in Standards and Certification, is that there's so many amazing people that are willing to share their knowledge and their expertise and their failures and things they need help with. Society of Women Engineers, SWE, is another great one. Thanks, Laura, for that. And that we can advance this industry together. And I think so many of you would agree that this type of connectivity is really what makes us special. It's what we love about coming to these events and seeing each other. And we're all working to build a better future for people everywhere. And I think there's just so much more that we can do together. And there's a lot of groups being populated in the chat. So everybody make sure that you find the group that works for you in your area. There's a lot of options for us. And so I love this picture because I feel like as women, we are just resilient. We are the resilient ones. And there's so much power in people coming together, and there's power in women coming together. And I would just encourage you to invest in yourself, look into some of these things that I've talked about today. Feel free to reach out to me. And I would say too, that sometimes burnout does come from just a root cause of a misalignment with your work and what your purpose in life really is. I know Laura Lynn's on this session. I saw her in the room, and she always says that the things that she's doing in her career are, it's her life's work. It's really the most important thing to her, is bringing people together around advancing technology, especially in the medical space, where you can see the transformative power of it. And I just think that there's so many things that we can do to align the work that we do every day with the things that we're able to do in our work and our home and our lives. So I thank you for this opportunity to share with you some thoughts and some things that I've pulled together for you. There's sources here, including Harvard Business, Wall Street Journal, Fast Company. I encourage you to download the McKinseyLeanin.org study. There's something in there also called The Broken Rung, which is a whole nother thing about female advancement. I mean, the good news is that we are filling the ranks of upper management, but we just have to continue to keep doing that. So I'm able to take some questions. I see there's a couple things in the Q&A. Okay. Okay. Can I take these questions, Sarah, or you want to do?
No, I was going to help you with the questions, but if you've got them.
Awesome. Awesome. Okay. Well, one of them is imposter syndrome, which there's a great, it says, how does imposter syndrome play into burnout? And there's something that I just really want to say about imposter syndrome. There's another great podcast out there from some folks, two women who've done some research. One of them is from the University of Michigan, go blue anyway, but where they have said imposter syndrome is not just female. Imposter syndrome is across all genders. And it's really about this idea of not feeling confident in the things that your role is in your job, or you feel like you're really not equipped. I mean, let's be honest. Most of us are not equipped fully for everything that we have to face on a daily basis. But I would encourage you to look more into imposter syndrome. There's a great podcast about it, and it really has some great tips and information in it. I wish I knew the name of the people off the top of my head, but it's on Brene Brown's podcast that she does, which I would really recommend. The stages of the stress cycle and what does it mean to complete it? Well, the idea of the stress cycle when you're kind of in that beginning phase is when the stressor is identified. So that's when you're like, okay, the hippopotamus is now chasing me. The person is tailgating me. I am late to pick up my children at daycare. I remember that feeling in my chest of like, oh my God, and it's $1 a minute right now. So those things combined. But the idea of, what it means to complete it is the beginning is when the stressor is identified. The middle is either that fight or flight thing. It's that hypothalamus in our brain that really gives us that kind of fight or flight reaction. And this is the place where there needs to be some kind of physical activity, whether it's just getting up and out of your house and walking around the block for a minute, or it's, maybe you need to go do a triathlon, whatever's on your schedule, but the idea is that once that physical reaction is realized, that then we can get to the end, which is the end of the tunnel, and the all clear signal comes through. So I would encourage you to look up some of these resources from the Nagoski sisters, from leanin.org and McKinsey. And thanks to all of you for being here. I hope this was useful to you. And I wish you all health and happiness, and hope to see you all soon in person.
Thank you so much, Debbie. That was incredible. You brought up some amazing points, valuable resources, and we're so thankful to have you here for this conversation. Debbie, we'll hopefully see you a little bit later in the networking table on the main stage.
Yep.
And it was great to have you here today. Everyone else, we'll be right back.